Welcome to Ask the Compound. On today's show, we are answering questions about how to set long-term return expectations for retirement planning, real returns after inflation, how to find lower auto insurance rates after your auto company jacks up your price, like they do to everyone these days, how to defer taxes on retirement savings as a business owner, how to find new clients as a younger financial advisor, and what's the right asset allocation to alternative investments. Now, if you have a question for us about your finances, the markets, the economy, inflation, men's fashion, Oatly call options, anything else that's on your mind, email us, askthecompoundshow@gmail.com. Today's show is sponsored by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I was on Rocket Money today because my cable discount runs out this week. Regular listeners of the show know that I'm a master cable bill negotiator, and I said, you know what? Rocket Money offered to negotiate it for me. They said they could get 25% off my bill, which is way more than I ever get every year. So they're going to handle it for me.
Wow.
Put it in.
So you have a bill broker now.
I do. I have a cable broker. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, has saved people up to $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's features. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/ATC. That's rocketmoney.com/ATC. Pretty easy. You can use it on the desktop. There's an app for the mobile phone. It's easy. Do it.
Yep.
All right. Duncan, just want you to know, you're wearing a backwards hat today.
I am.
I can't do that because the unwritten rule is once you become a father, there's no more backwards hats.
Oh, is that the rule?
I don't make the rules. I just follow them. Yes.
Okay. What if you're like a really cool dad, though? Couldn't you still wear one?
Sorry, I'm not going to lie.
See, for me, it's if the hat doesn't fit well, I'll wear it backwards. So I like this hat, but it doesn't really fit me very well.
It looks like you're going to take a really good picture, like you turn the hat around. All right, first question. Let's do it.
Okay, up first today, we've got one from Andrew. My wife and I are in our late 30s and hoping to retire at 60 when we can begin withdrawing from our retirement accounts penalty-free. Our plan is to let our $650,000 stock portfolio ride for that 22-year period while continuing to max out our Roth IRAs. Let's say that the stock market's average annual rate of return when adjusted for inflation is around 7%. We can therefore estimate that our portfolio, when we retire at age 60, will be about $3.6 million in today's dollars. A more conservative 6% rate of return yields a portfolio of $3 million. I know we're not guaranteed a 7% or even a 6% annual rate of return, but based on historical data, how confident can we be that over a 22-year period, we'll get an annual rate of return that approaches 7%? In stock market history, what's the worst annual rate of return over a 22-year period? What percentage of 22-year periods have an annual rate of return of at least 6%? This is like homework. This was homework.
Some people might look at this as homework. I look at this as a challenge. This question is definitely in the Ben Carlson wheelhouse. I'm a sucker for historical data, retirement scenario planning. A few things I like about this question. They're thinking in real terms since inflation can add up over the decades. That makes sense. They're thinking in inflation-adjusted returns as well because spending is the only thing that matters in retirement. So they're saying after inflation, what are my returns? I like how they're thinking in terms of both the baseline, what's the average, and then the worst case scenario. Like what can I plan for if things don't go well? And I like how they're looking at long-term planning in their 30s. Like our audience is ahead of it. So let's go to the data. From 1926 through June of 2024, the S&P 500 is compounded at an annual inflation-adjusted rate. Take inflation out of it, 7.2% per year. That is a pretty darn good average. Now, if you look at other countries across the globe, they are not that good. But the winners write the history books, as they say. So, John, let's do chart on. Here's a look at the rolling 22-year real returns for the S&P 500. Remember, this is annual after inflation. Nominal returns would obviously be higher in some periods. So the average, again, 7.2%. The best return ever, 13.3%. That was ending in the 1960s after the big 1950s bull market. And then you had another 13% or so return ending in 2000. The worst real return ever, ending in 1982, 1.4% per year. That was after the 70s. Of course, you had annual inflation of 6% per year over this 22-year period, which is a very high hurdle to beat, and that's probably why it was so crappy. Of course, really good returns came after that period. So, John, chart off. As always, markets are cyclical. This thing goes up and down. So the average is there, but it's rarely right around the average. Actually, the most recent period, ending in June 2024, 7.5% real. So it was basically a little bit more than the average, right around there. So not too bad. The good news is no negative real returns over this 22-year period. Now, of course, 22 years is kind of pulled out of thin air, but that's their retirement planning, so that's what we're looking at. John, let's look at the real return rates. So I looked at least 3%, at least 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So at least 6%, which is what their lowest one was, 59% of the time. So 2 out of every 5 times of a 22-year period, you didn't get at least 6%. So not like guaranteed. I view 4 to 5% real as a pretty decent long-term return in the stock market. If we get that going forward, I would be pretty happy with that. That's more like 70 to 80% of the time. And then we're talking 45% of the time, at least 7%. So obviously the future doesn't have to look like the past, but even if we use history as a guide, real returns aren't really a sure thing if you're looking for the 6 to 7%. It really depends on your starting point and what happens from here and how high inflation is. So I think this is what makes retirement planning so difficult, because no one knows what the future returns are going to be. And it's kind of nerve-wracking to think through all the unknowns with inflation and interest rates and the stock market returns. And I think for any type of multi-decade planning, when we're talking about a time horizon like this, it's important to set baseline expectations like this, but also understand their educated guesses. These things aren't set in stone. I think you have to update your plans as expectations become reality. I banked on 6% returns, but actually I got 4. Or I banked on 6, but I got 10. And then update that. And I think you have to just always include a margin of safety in case you're wrong, because rarely does life map out like your expectations. And then you make course corrections along the way as needed. It would be much easier if you could just take this annual return. I'm going to get 6% year in and year out. Follow the spreadsheet. It's going to be this linear line, and I'm going to just follow. It doesn't work like that. So I think you just have to make reasonable decisions with all the information you have now. Then as the future comes in, then you update and adapt. And that's not the precise answer most people want, but financial planning does not come with 100% precision, ever. So they're on the right track. They're thinking in terms of long term, but I think you just have to be willing to be adaptable to whatever comes at you in the future, because it's not going to be that easy. Fair?
It seems like the scariest scenario is like your first year or two of retirement, a massive drawdown in the market.
Yes. Sequence of return risk, they call that. I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. But yeah, that's why you want to have some sort of liquidity and cash reserves, so you're not selling stocks when they get hammered right away. That is the thing most retirees, I think, worry about, is if there's a 2 or 3 year bear market right when I retire, I'm screwed. It doesn't have to be that way, but a lot of people worry about that.
You know why I know about that?
No, why?
I read your book.
Oh, way to go. Hey, someone says your hat game is better than my shirt game.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big compliment.
That's impressive. All right, question number 2.
Okay. All right, up next, we have a question from Jacob. Just got my renewal for my auto and homeowners up 16.8%. Any tips?
A lot of people are in the same situation, yours truly included. I wrote about auto insurance at A Wealth of Common Sense recently because the increases households are seeing is crazy. So, John, throw the first chart up. I looked at U.S. CPI, motor vehicle insurance versus the U.S. CPI. And this is over the past 5 years. Insurance is up nearly 50%. The CPI itself is up more like 22%. And most of that difference has come since 2023. Over the past year, auto insurance is up close to 20%, and actual inflation is up more like 3%. So a lot of it has actually come in the last year, and people are saying, what is going on? I get this renewal, and it's up huge, bigger than I've ever seen it before. So I've got some reasons here. We'll go through the reasons first, then we'll talk about what your plan of attack should be. First of all, vehicle costs are up. Inflation is higher. Used car prices are up. Higher prices, higher replacement costs. That's pretty easy. Parts, maintenance, and labor are up. A few years ago, I got into a little fender bender with my Explorer. I wasn't driving. My wife was, not to throw her under the bus, but it's true. She ran into a tree. The worst part about it was we were on a family trip and we had the bike rack in the back of our car. And so she crunched the bikes too. Not only did I lose the bumper, but it was still drivable. And it was like $15,000. I obviously just paid the deductible, but they said because of all the sensors and all this, that it's more expensive. So I imagine with EVs and self-driving cars, all those little sensors, anytime you get into a little fender bender, it's going to be really expensive to fix. And so the parts are more expensive. I didn't realize this. A bunch of people sent this to me. Drivers got worse during the pandemic. So the thing was, early on in the pandemic, people were off the road because people were staying at home more. And so the people who were on the road were driving faster because there was less traffic. And then when people came back on the road and there was more congestion, more traffic, people still tried to drive fast. Combine that with people looking down at their cell phones all the time, and there's more accidents now because people are getting worse at driving, which I can attest to. 75% of drivers are on the road. Terrible. awful. I'm a great driver. A lot of people aren't.
Also, like you've complained before, a lot of people don't understand how to use cruise control, and
True.
it drives me crazy.
Me too.
If you're on the highway cruising, you should be using cruise control.
Yes. Stop slowing down and speeding up.
Yeah.
All right. Here's another one. Personal injury lawsuits have doubled since the 1980s. Every time you go into a big city, you see the billboards for, have you been injured? We will get you money. I didn't realize that that's such a big, that's a part of it too. There's more people being sued, so that increases insurance. Another one, climate change, hurricanes, wildfires, natural disasters. It's, that takes out more cars and that makes it more costly. So are these things going to settle down eventually? I would hope so. I don't know. Regardless of the reasons, you have to have a plan of attack if this happens to you. Some people will just complain and eat the higher cost. That's me at a restaurant. I get a crappy meal. How is it, sir? Yeah, it's good. I don't complain. I'm not going to say, can I see your manager? But with insurance, yes, I'm going to complain. John, throw up my chart here, or my tweet. I talked about my home insurance. My home insurance renewal is 30% year over year. And I actually shopped around and found a rate that was 20% lower than that. And so it was 50% lower than my renewal amount, if that makes sense. So just because I shopped around. And that's what you have to do. And this was about home insurance, but I did the same thing for auto insurance, and home insurance is more costly, obviously. So I'd say start with the big ones, the online ones, Progressive, Geico, Liberty, State Farm. My kids really like the Liberty one. They always sing that stupid commercial. You can do most of it online, right? And if they don't offer competitive rates, and they'll give you an estimate right there, just have your coverages handy. If they don't give you a competitive rate, call a local broker because they will go out and look for you. Call your local insurance company. You see them on the little strip malls. Call a couple of those places. Tell them what you're looking for, and they will go look for you. It doesn't have to take that long. As long as you have your information, a lot of it can be done online. They are the ones who do the heavy lifting for you. Now, a lot of people say, well, sure, Ben, you switch providers and they give you a first-year discount, but then next year you're going to have to do the same thing again. And to that I say, so what? Do it. I do it. So what if it takes you an hour or something? You'll save a lot of money. The worst that can happen is no one gives you a better rate. Sometimes that happens. I had that one year where I tried a bunch of auto insurers and just no one would give me a better rate. I had to eat it. But with home insurance and auto this year, it was 20 to 30% less by looking for a new provider. So that's what you have to do. Get out there. And you can also try your current provider. They're probably going to tell you to get lost, but it's worth trying.
I started this process recently. The worst part so far is I used one of those online calculator things, and now I'm just getting spammed with like texts and phone calls.
You get inundated with, when you sign up for one of these things, be prepared to get inundated, calls, emails, texts, that sort of thing. They're going to come at you, but try to find someone that'll do the shopping for you. But it's worth shopping around. You can save a lot of money on these kind of things. And it's a one-time negotiation.
Just make sure it is a comparable plan, though, right? I think some people miss that sometimes. They're like, oh, wow, I found this cheap plan. It's like, well, yeah, it covers half as much as your
Yes, have your coverages available and say, I want these same coverages that I had before. But let's be honest. How many people actually know what the right coverage amount is?
Like 0.5%.
It's probably a small amount.
Yeah, probably.
All right, next question.
Okay, up next we have a question from Zach. Hi, guys. I have a question about a retirement plan that is rarely discussed. I run my own business and have an individual solo 401k plan. It has all the bells and whistles, after-tax contributions, direct in-plan Roth conversions, etc. And I contribute the statutory maximum every year. In order to prevent myself from being inconvenienced by the IRS annually, I'm
fornicated. It said fornicated in the question. It's a good word.
It did. I'm considering
Duncan tried to bleep it out.
I did. I visually bleeped it. It's a family show, you know. I'm considering starting a defined benefit plan. I would like to know your opinion on these plans. My thought is I would go with this plan and target conservative growth, then convert it to a annuity when I retire. I don't understand anything they're talking about in this.
Fornicated is the kind of word that sounds dirtier than it is. I think that's like the highbrow version of getting effed, right? All right, you're right. There's a lot of misunderstanding here. There's so many retirement plans. There's 401ks and 457s and 403bs, solo 401ks, IRAs, SEP IRAs. Let's bring in a retirement planning expert to help sort this out. Dan LaRosa. He helps run our retirement plan department at Ritholtz Wealth. Dan, I've worked on a handful of these plans with you, and I say it's still kind of confusing for me. So what is the one? What is Zach talking about here? This is just for solo business owners, or maybe not solo, but small business owners. Explain it to me.
Yeah, so first off, Zach, great job. I mean, maxing out the 401k, love that. But you're right. I mean, defined benefit plans, pension plans are a blind spot for a lot of people, some advisors included. They're rarely discussed because they're just less common. You don't see them as much, and they're a lot more complex than
Right, because a
some
lot of
others.
people think of them as you're getting the big defined benefit plan at General Motors or something that's
Yep.
going to pay for the retirement of their workers. But this is more of a small business type of thing. So explain that.
Yep. Yeah, the same way that you can have a solo 401k, right? The 401k is the same thing. It's for a large corporation. But the same way, if you're an owner-only plan or you're an owner-only business, you can have a solo K. You can also have an owner-only defined benefit plan. So same idea. It only works for you if you're self-employed. You have no other employees. It's an owner-only plan. But it's just a lot more complicated, a lot more complex, right?
But you can defer a lot more money with these, correct?
Yes, and that's always the first question everyone wants to know: how much money can I put away? But before you get into how much that you can, put away each year into a defined benefit plan, you got to figure out if you're a good fit, right? So for this type of plan, owner only, like Zach's situation, ideal fit is someone that has high earners. You have to be a high earner, income north of 250 to 300, pretty consistently each year, and you have to be able to consistently fund the plan for 3 to 5 years, right? IRS.
So you can't just do it in a one good year that stop or
Right.
something.
Yeah, these are not like temporary tax shelters. If you just have a blowout year, you can put a bunch of money away. IRS likes to view these as, quote unquote permanent, right? You have to have them in place for a certain amount of time. Generally accepted as 3 to 5 years minimum ability to fund. So right off the bat, that disqualifies a lot of people.
So high income, small solo business, and you're planning on doing it for a number of years.
Correct.
Okay.
No, it doesn't have to be permanent, not forever, but minimum 3 to 5 years.
But how much money are we talking about here that someone can potentially put away?
Yeah, so if you check those boxes, right? Again, there are a lot of variables that go into this. Defined benefit plans are more complicated because they involve, formulas that are put together by actuaries, right? But generally speaking, if you're in your 30s, between the solo K and the defined benefit plan, you could figure you're looking at roughly $150,000 between the two that you can put away, which is more than the solo 401k is great, but you're capped out at $69,000 this year, right?
So it's a lot of money you can
a lot more.
defer from taxes.
Yeah, if we're talking age 50 plus, it's north of $300,000
because you get to catch up all that stuff.
Right. So the older you are, the more that you can put away, because again, it's not a defined contribution; it's defined benefit. So the less time you have to make contributions, the more you can contribute.
And the part that always confuses me about these is there's certain return hurdles that you have to get right. And so this is the kind of thing where you want to work with an expert on something like this, right? Because you have to understand these things don't work like a 401k.
Yeah, and this is easily the biggest issue I see with these types of plans, or the most misunderstood aspect of them. And I'm glad Zach mentioned it. He said he wants to target conservative growth. That's great. The objective of these plans, the purpose of a defined benefit plan is tax deferred money, right? You put away as much as you can without paying taxes.
Right. The taxes end up being the biggest selling point here.
That's it. That's literally the only selling point. And the
You're not
goal
going
here,
to experience huge growth in these plans from a return perspective.
well, some people do that. They'll invest. A lot of people will invest these types of accounts the same way they invest their solo K or other retirement accounts, which I get. We're hardwired to do that, right? But that is going to do you more harm than good, because if the performance, the investment returns are too high, that can limit your contributions. And the whole purpose of these is contributions, right? So if Zach, wants to find ways around letting the IRS have their way with them, this is the way to do it, but you have to do it right. Right. And in a down year, if returns are too low, then your required minimum contribution can be maybe higher than your
right. Yeah. If you experience a big loss, you might have to re-up it, right?
That's right. That's right. So the key here is low volatility, right? You want to be as boring as possible inside of the defined benefit plan, and just view it as your conservative sleeve, right? Again,
right. Like Oatly call options, maybe some puts here and there.
A little bit of Oatly is fine. Never hurt anyone. But yeah, boring is good with defined benefit plans. Again, the key is put away as much money as you can. And if you stay within that, generally it's like the target in these plans, the formulas are built around an expected return of 3 to 6%, 3 to 5%. So super low. And,
right. But with the tax deferral there, that can grow to a lot of way more money than you would be able to put in these other plans.
It's a cheat code. It really is, right? I mean, when you you can max out a 401k at 69,000, but you can put in 300,000 plus, depending on your age, into a defined benefit plan. That's a home run.
So you needed, I would recommend finding an expert. We get a lot of questions from people here in our inbox about their crappy 401k plans at work too. So if you want a better option, Dan is the man. Reach out to RWM, talk to him, he can help.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Dan. All right, another question.
Okay. Up next, we have a question from Kyle. I'm a fairly new financial advisor out on Long Island. I'm
on Long Island, not in Long Island. I learned these
in-
things from my New York people.
Exactly, yeah. They're actually out on the island. I'm having trouble prospecting and finding good leads on clients. I've tried everything from door knocking, cold calling, seminars, and street fairs. Any advice on how you foresee the future of prospecting going, as no one opens their door or even answers the phone for unknown numbers these days?
Street
Sounds
fairs.
like a tough situation. I definitely don't answer the phone.
Yes, and I think the world has changed, and especially for younger advisors, I think you have to understand your clientele. So let's bring in a certified financial planner.
First
Younger
time ever
guy.
on the show.
Yep, Cameron Rufus, who works with
Cameron.
us, works with a wide range of clients at Ritholtz Wealth. Cameron, things have changed. People don't answer their phones anymore. They don't answer their door anymore. I feel like you have to have a beard like Duncan to go to a street fair. That's just a guess.
You can get a good candy apple or something there, right?
So what do you think as a young person this person, obviously they're ready to put the work in, but they're realizing, okay, I'm going to the wrong places. So what do we do here?
Yeah, so for one, Duncan's beard does help. But no, I want to start off by commending our listener, Kyle. Door knocking is not easy. So in high school, this is a true story. I got a job door knocking for a company called Weed Man. Duncan, try knocking on doors telling people that you're with Weed Man.
Yeah,
When
it
they
sounds
realize-
like a joke.
Right. When they realized that I wasn't the Weed Man they ordered, next thing I knew, I was talking to a lot of doors.
Isn't that a Dave Chappelle movie? Right. Okay.
Right. So yeah, no, I came here about 3 years ago with really no clients, no real financial advising experience, really all off the strength of starting this little blog called Wealth Found Me about 5 years ago. So honestly, from there, then I just started writing for anyone that would let me. So for this listener, for young or new advisors, the
I'm
best
curious,
advice that I got.
what was your reason for starting a blog? Tell us the story.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I mean, honestly, it started because I was working for a few different insurance companies, and I just knew that there was more out there, but I really just didn't get along with maybe some of their methodologies. So ended up leaving that, and I knew I wanted to stay in the financial advising world somehow, some way. So yeah, I just started this little blog, just kind of regurgitating a lot of the stuff that I was learning in my finance classes, maybe talking a little bit about life. And mind you, this is like November, December of 2019. So this is like right before COVID really kicked off. And so I had a lot of time on my hands, honestly. I think that's
And
part
the
of
great
it.
thing about the internet is that it gives you scale. You don't going door knocking there's no scale or efficiency involved there.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, we're not trying to tell people like you have to do it exactly like we did at Ritholtz Wealth. There's so many different ways that you can reach people these days. There's LinkedIn, there's Substack, YouTube, podcasting, blogs, TikTok. There's just different ways to communicate with people. And I think you just have to find whatever you're good at or what your niche is. And your point about using it as a learning tool, I think is very important because producing content forces you to keep learning because
Right.
you have to gather your own thoughts. And that's one of my favorite things about blogging is that it forces me to, sort of organize my own thoughts that are jumbled up in my brain and put them down here and better communicate. And I think it helps you become a better communicator. I had a call with a younger advisor a couple months ago who's had the same exact question. And I told him that producing some sort of content, one of the biggest things is that, especially as a young person, it helps you build up a library of expertise because you're going to get the same questions over and over again. I was mentioning to Michael on Animal Spirits this week, every 4 years when there's an election, people have the same worries about the market. Well, there's going to be volatility in the market. And if you say, hey, listen, I wrote about this 2 years ago. Here's the blog post or newsletter that I wrote. It gives you this, oh, okay, this person has thought about this before. It puts
Right.
people at ease that you've already thought through these challenges they're going through.
Yeah, it's almost like a digital resume.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So
Yes.
some of the best advice that I got was meet people where they are, right? And nowadays that's mostly online. And online is also the internet, social medias. It's a good place to be as part of a specific community, just like Ask the Compound, right? So for people who are specifically looking for financial advice as well. So it does kind of take out the hassle of having to cold call and door knock on to people who honestly may not even be in the market for what you're trying to convey. Right. So,
Yeah, and sometimes people aren't ready, but if you send out a weekly blast to your current clients and you gather emails for potential prospects and just throw their emails on your list, if you're in their inbox once a week, in a 6 months time or 9 months or 18 months when they have a question or they have something going on in their finances or they get an inheritance or whatever it is, they change jobs or need a new house. Oh, this person that I've been reading for the last year, they seem to know what they're talking about. I'm going to reach out to them. So it's the kind of thing that compounds and it doesn't happen immediately. Like if you knock on someone's door and they're busy and they're not thinking about this stuff right now, scram, get out of here. I'm not looking for that right now. It's when they're looking. You don't know when that's going to be.
Exactly. And I mean, starting whether it's a blog or maybe TikToking, Instagram, Twitter, like I can't promise, Kyle, that you're going to find a ton of new prospects at first. But again, kind of going back to the connections piece in the community, you're going to find some people that are open to helping you out, right? And watching you grow as a financial advisor more so than a content creator.
Yes, use it as a learning experience. Great advice. All right,
Future Proof could be a pretty good place to network too, right? Meet people.
Not a bad idea. Yeah, and learn from other advisors as well. All right, we got one more question.
Okay, last but not least, we have a question from Ryan. Fellow Midwesterner here in Cleveland. I listened to the Animal Spirits Talk Your Book with Marco, and it got me thinking about how you might address the alternative market for the Ask the Compound community. Does having access to private real estate, private credit, private equity via internal type funds or BDCs, business development companies, right?
Nailed it.
For everyday investors, does that help or hurt? Does someone with average to high net worth benefit from having access to these types of vehicles? Asking selfishly to understand if it's something I might consider to diversify my current holdings. And then they go into some details for them personally. I'm 35, married, 2 kids, 1.5 million in invested assets across different types of accounts, not to brag, mostly in mutual funds, ETFs, and individual stocks. Yeah, good job. $425,000 30-year mortgage at 2.61%. Again, not to brag. We're never moving unless the Midwest climate change hedge works and people start coming here to avoid disaster. Well, that got grim.
Cameron, also a fellow Midwesterner here. All
yeah,
right.
Shout out to Ohio.
So there's a few things that I want to pull out of this question, and one of them is I think a lot of people assume I have more money. That means it's time to start thinking about alternatives because when I get to this certain level of wealth, there must be this secret door that I can unlock, and it's going to make it easier to manage this wealth or keep it or something there. So I'm curious your thoughts about, first of all, do people need to have alternatives, especially when they gain a little bit more wealth?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think about it like this, right? So imagine you're in the grocery store, you're doing your normal walkthrough, getting all the essential. So you got your cheeses, your milk, your eggs. Then you got your vegetables, your meat. Sorry, Duncan, and potatoes, rice. Right.
Me too.
So,
I'm a plant-based diet now, Cameron.
Hopefully, I don't get converted by the end of this. Episode. But no, just like you have your stocks, your bonds, all these different sectors that you need, right? So you already have a well-diversified portfolio. Then you get to the ice cream aisle. Right? Heaven on earth. So you got your cones, you got your gelato, all the different variations of ice creams. You got your French vanillas, chocolate chip, right? Just like you have your hedge funds, your private real estate, private equity, private credit, venture capital. So, I mean, I would say it's okay to have a little fun in here and there. The problem is what happens when you eat the entire tub of ice cream?
Right. Stomach ache.
Right. So at the end of the day, I think it's all about sizing these things appropriately. Right. So if this goes to zero, are you going to be okay? Is your financial picture still going to be okay if this thing does not work out?
I agree. Set yourself some sort of ceiling. Especially if you're towing into the water and this stuff and you've never done it before, the biggest thing I always tell people is just don't invest in something if you don't understand it. Because I think one of the hardest questions to answer for most people is my investment fund or strategy or allocation, this piece of my portfolio is down. What do I do? Do I get rid of it or do I lean into the pain and rebalance and put more in here? And I think it's way easier to just give up on a strategy if you don't understand it. But if you understand it and say, listen, I'm betting on the U.S. stock market, of course I'm going to put more money in. It's down. This is a great buying opportunity. That's the kind of thing where you have to understand the strategy enough to know yeah, this thing is going through a shaky time, but it's cyclical, and this strategies, I'm pretty confident it's going to come back. That's the biggest issue with alternatives. There's nothing wrong with investing in some alternative strategy if you understand it, and to your point, if you size it correctly.
Right. Yep. Yeah. The other question is, why? Why do you want to be in these investments? Do you have a particular knowledge in this sector? Is that why you're interested? So that's part of it. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend more than 10% of your total allocation into some kind of alternative investment, whether that's Bitcoin or Oatly, or even your employer stock, right? So yeah, to that logic, like at most you'd have maybe $100,000 to $150,000 into one of these funds, right? And we'll just pick on private real estate for a second. Even if that fund says that they're diversified across office space and industrials, residential, again, you really only have enough to be in this one fund that's potentially locked up for 7 to 10 years, which means that you're no longer as diversified as you thought, right? At that point, you're pretty much beholden to the portfolio manager and how they perform.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think.
And one of the coolest things about the investment product landscape for the past 10 to 15 years is that there's more ways to access this stuff than ever before. You wouldn't have been able to access it before,
Right.
and now you do have access. The problem is there's so many different choices to make. To your first point, what are you in it for in the first place? Are you looking to hedge some volatility? Are you looking to have less drawdowns? Are you looking for just some diversification benefits or income or whatever? So you have to define what you're looking for first before you ever try to get into this stuff, because there's so many different avenues you could explore within the alts bucket.
Yeah, exactly. So again, kind of going back to the question, I don't think it's something that anyone needs per se, but if you're going to do it, again, just make sure that you size it right, because of course we all want our investments, our Oatly, to go on to 10x, right? But sometimes they do go to zero, and virtually over one decision or another. So these things do happen. They do tend to carry a little bit more risk.
Yeah, and the
Seems
portfolio
like-
management aspect of it is a little tougher. It's hard. You mentioned the liquidity thing. It's harder to rebalance. It's harder to get your money out if and when you need it. So you can think, I've got this great hedge, but if you can't access that money when you want to or need to, when other stuff is down, to rebalance or to use it for spending, that kind of defeats the diversification purpose. So just know what you're getting yourself into when you do this.
It seems like the fees are typically higher on alts. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. That's another thing to worry about. And unfortunately, when the alts get to the retail level, we're talking about some potential also-rans, and we're talking about fees on top of fees on top of fees potentially.
Right.
So just be careful. If you can find an alt in an ETF structure, I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because you still have the liquidity, and it might not be exactly what you're looking for in terms of like a college endowment gets, but it might actually be better for you overall, because you can pull the ripcord if need be. So yeah, I think it requires way more education than a regular traditional mix of stocks and bonds.
Yep, agreed.
And if you're going to buy ice cream, just nothing with nuts in it.
I strongly disagree. I'm a big pistachio guy.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a pistachio allergy in our house, so I have to stay away.
I was saying I'm a big Dole Whip guy. I like Dole Whip. So shout out Disney.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's like the most boring dessert I've ever heard.
What?
Dole Whip?
Pineapple flavored, like sorbet or whatever it is. It's pretty good. I think it's good.
All right. I want to thank Dan and Cameron for helping us out today. Is this the first time we've had two people on the show? Same
It
time?
is, as far as I know.
Great job to the
You know what?
production
We
team
did it in
behind
the
the
studio
scenes.
one time, but yeah,
Okay.
count it.
We've got a deep bench here at the compound. Much appreciated. Remember, if you've got a question for us, askthecompoundshow@gmail.com. Leave us a question, leave us a review, leave us a comment on YouTube. Thanks to the live people on Twitter and in the stream. As always, we'll see you next time.
We have over 2,100 people watching right now.
There you go.
Pretty cool.
Thanks everyone.
See ya.